Hey everyone, and welcome to our watercolor sheep portrait class. I'm so glad you're here. My name's April Knight and I lead Scripturedoodle, and I am so passionate about helping people connect with God in a creative way through art workshops and resources. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you what is in your kit. Okay, so there's a chance you have a digital version of the kit, which would be worksheet downloads and then a collection of similar art supplies to these. Anything you have that's kind of like it will do. The first thing you have is this little gift from me. It's a mini print of one of my original sheep portrait paintings. These sheep portrait series, these paintings I started years ago, were really this declaration for myself. I often wrestle with negative self-talk and just defeating thoughts. So if that's you, you are in good company. And so I created these portraits as a reminder for myself and also for others of who you are in Christ and all the true good things that God feels about you. So that's my little gift to you. And then you also have the worksheets that we will work through in the class today. There's about 10 of them. We will go through them step by step. So you've either printed these out or you have them in your paper kit. You also have 2 pieces of watercolor paper. For those of you who are wondering, this is a Canson brand 140-pound cold-pressed watercolor paper. You can get it at any of your favorite art retailers, and it's just my favorite. It's affordable and it's great quality too. You also have this 5x7 mat that is just a bonus that you're going to get to frame your little portrait in at the end. And then you also have my favorite pencil ever, Ticonderoga, or any number 2 pencil will work. And this is a Pigma Micron. This is a felt tip pen. It is size 08. It has an archival ink, so it's permanent, and you can go over it with water and paint, etc., and it will not bleed. And then you have a size 6 round brush. This is from Dick Blick. That's my favorite art supplier, and they don't even pay me to say that, but they have a lot of great art supplies. And this is a size 6 round brush. You could also use a flat brush, a bright brush, anything that you have that's small enough to get those details and not stress you out. Okay, and I wanted to show you, and then you have your watercolors. So this is just a basic watercolor set, beginner level. I love it because there's lots of different colors to work from, and you don't have to do a ton of mixing, which is really great for a class like this. So you have that, or perhaps something similar. And then I wanted to take a minute to show you just some examples of, there's so much you can do in this class. This is sort of what we'll be creating today, a version of this, but you can also do, take it a little farther and do something more detailed. This is a version of the portrait in an acrylic paint, or even just black and white sketch style. My hope today is that you get a good foundation of how to create a portrait like this, and then you can take it and make it whatever you want it. This is a great gift, something you could give to a friend or a loved one, a family member, sharing all the good things that you love about them. So just keep that in mind as you get the good foundation today. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I did want to note that these papers, in case you have your own watercolor paper, these are cut to about 5.5 by 7.5. So the only thing to keep in mind if you don't have this exact paper is the sizing. If you do plan to put it in a mat, you may even set it under your mat and just mark the corners so that you don't go out and beyond the size of the mat itself, because it's easy to make it too big and then your words wouldn't fit inside or something like that. So just keep that in mind. I like to mark my corners as I work. You do have 2 pieces, mostly because just in case you make a mistake or something like that, you have something to go from there. All right, so first things first, I'm going to run through these step-by-step instructions, and then we will work through it step by step. But the first thing to do is to choose a face template shape. Now, many of you are probably going to use our templates, which are towards the end of your worksheets. And these are designed to help you so you don't have to do a ton of the legwork of drawing from scratch. I am also going to talk you through creating a face shape and hairstyle, that type of thing. So some of you who are feeling bold and you're going to try this freehand, that is awesome. And I'm going to walk you through that in the class. I'm also going to walk through the template style where you're doing it's almost like a tracing step to get that good face that you want on there. So I'll also show you how to adjust hairstyle or shape face to make it look a little bit more like you or whoever it is that you're creating your artwork for. Okay, so first thing is to choose a face shape template. So if you pull out page number, I think it's in the back, page 7, 8, and 9 are the templates that you guys have to work from. There are several options. So you have a short hair, an extra short hair, and then you've got long straight hair, short curly hair with a little headband, and then I have a few other longer wavy hair options, braided hair, and even some other options here as well. So just choose one that you like. The good thing about all these templates is that they are all sized appropriately, that they will fit inside this frame that you have. So you don't have to worry of it being too big or out of line. It will definitely fit inside your frame in that 5x7 size. Okay, so you're going to choose your template. Then you're going to adjust any hairstyles that you create if you choose to adjust it at all. Then I'm going to teach you how to do a graphite transfer onto your watercolor paper. Then we'll outline your final image in your micron pen. Then we will create our affirmation phrases and add it to our piece. Obviously, that's an optional part of it. You do have an affirmation worksheet within your worksheets, and also a few other phrases that I have handwritten beautifully in case you don't like your handwriting or something like that. So obviously that's optional in these pictures. It's nice to just have a few different lines. You can either put them outside in the background of the photo or on her face like I often do. We're going to work through that so that you can put whatever you feel led to on that as well. But we'll do that towards the end. Okay, so then lastly, you're going to add your watercolor, and then I will walk you through how to create these highlights and shadows on the face and get that good shading in there so that your portrait is looking great. Okay, let's start I'm going to just show you a few different ways to create your face. Get some white paper in here. Okay, so while I'm doing this, you can feel free to be looking through your templates. If you look on page 5 of the worksheets, I have the hairstyles. 5, 6, I have the head shape, and then your templates start on 7, 8, 9, and 10. So you can look through the templates and decide which one that you like, but I'm also going to talk you through these hairstyles and head shapes. Let's flip to the head shape page first, and I'll talk you through these options. Okay, so there's a few different options: an oval face, a round face, a square face, and then you have a long face or a heart-shaped face. You may be saying, I don't know what kind of face shape I have. It doesn't really matter. Maybe you're sitting with a friend. You could ask them what they think. I think, pick whichever one you like or which one you think most looks like you. It doesn't matter too much. Things like the hair and the affirmation is going to kind of customize the portrait as well. So just look through these, and they have slight differences. So the main thing I want you to see is two different things. One, when we're creating, this is especially if you're freehanding, when we're creating our hairline, you're not starting the hair at the top of the skull like maybe you would when you were drawing as a child or something. There is always this hairline. This forehead starts sort of like, 2/3 the way up the head. And then you even have this like hairline, which is slightly above the skull as well, that's going to give you a little bit of body and head shape. So you can see right here with the heart-shaped face, I'm starting this widow's peak right here, which is slightly below the skull, but that is going to apply even if you don't have a widow's peak. You're going to come down a little bit once you choose your head shape, and then you're going to come down to start that hairline, okay? And if you have a lower forehead, you're going to bring it maybe down farther. If you have a higher forehead, just adjust accordingly. The other thing I want to show you is we're not doing eyes today, but the eye line, the eyes are set in the middle of the head. And mostly we're noting that here with this line so that we know where the ears are beginning. So the ears are going to fall just under that eye line. And we're doing very simple ears, just these little sort of like curved, extended C-like shapes. And that is going to be where our ears go. And often you may not even really see the ears. Like for this girl right here, we just see the tiny little bit of the ears, but there's a chance we're going to draw our ears before we add any hair. So that's just, these will be sort of placeholders until you get your hair in there, and they'll be covered up somewhat anyway, but just a note there. Okay, the last thing I want to note for the head shape is your shoulder line, and how the shoulder width is about 3 head widths. So you have this head width here, and you can kind of mark that. If I'm measuring it properly, I have about a head length here where my shoulder goes down, and I've got a head width here as well where my shoulder hits. So sometimes you might be doing a portrait. I did this once in school when my proportions were way off, and I was actually drawing a picture of Marilyn Monroe, I think. And I remember my art teacher saying like, oh, well, her elbow was like way too far off. And so I was really frustrated, but it was just my proportion that was off. So if you are looking at your painting as you go, or as you're sketching, and you think like, I just feel like it looks off, think about those proportions. Are your ears set just under your eyes, in the middle of your head? Is your forehead hairline coming down low enough? Do you have a shoulder length that is 3 head widths about? That will give you sort of gauge so that your proportions are on. They don't have to be perfect, but anywhere in that ballpark is going to be great for you. Okay, so we're going to do hairstyle chat in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you through, if you are creating from scratch, how to give yourself a good little gauge. And for these purposes, I am going to grab my watercolor, and I might do a little guide here for myself. This is just a regular computer paper, which you will have in your kit. And then probably if you're going to freehand, the best case scenario is to choose a white piece of paper and draw on here, and then we will do our graphite transfer on that. If you are choosing a template, you're going to do your graphite transfer from here on this exact paper. But if you're freehanding, get that white piece of computer paper and we will sketch from there. You're going to do yourself a little frame just so you're not over creating it too large. Okay, so you're going to start with a loose oval shape. Anytime I'm sketching, it's good to know I am holding my pencil loosely and I'm not pressing down really hard. You're going to use light pressure while you're sketching and sort of hold that hand, the pencil loosely in your hand. If you get tense, you might want to shake your hand out, roll your shoulder a little bit to just kind of release that stress so that you can sketch without a shaky hand, and don't press too hard. It's easier to fix those mistakes when you have a light pencil line. Also, if you are ever sketching on your final piece of artwork, often if your pencil is, you're pressing down too hard, it's harder to erase those lines. Okay, so we're sketching loosely here. I'm going to pull my head shape guide out so I can have a look at it. And I'm going to go with sort of this oval shape right here. And so things I'm noting are, I'm going to start with this basic oval here. And then I'm going to give myself these guidelines. So I have a line across here that I'm sketching, which is going to be my eye line in the center. And then I have another line down the center, vertical, top to bottom, where the base of my chin is going to hit. And from there, I'm going to press a little bit harder to have a better, darker line. And I'm curving down slightly where the chin of my head is. So you can see those lines are coming into form a little bit more than they were. And I have this sort of somewhat vertical line here for the cheekbone, less rounded. And then I'm even going to bring that in a little bit more where I believe my hairline is going to be. And if this is the top of my skull right here, the temples will come in a little bit. And also I might note where I want that hairline to start. These are all like super loose lines. But the things to note are where the hairline comes in for the temples. I'm just noting that here. The skull itself is about out here. But bring in this line slightly, and that's going to be the curve of the temple where the hairline is kind of covering the rest of the head. For my ears, I'm going to have just a little of a curved line on each side. And then the ears are going to come to about here. Now, depending on, this is a little bit more extensive, but depending on the way that your head is tilted or not tilted, the ears are going to look like they're in a different place. So like if you're looking up, the ears are going to look lower on the head, right in line with that jawline. If you're looking down, the ears are going to look higher, sort of, you're going to have more of that cheekbone. For today, we're keeping it simple, and we're just going to have a straight on face. But you can see there's a little bit of line here in my chin before my ear starts, and then more of that head here. But where you're putting them on your page is we're going to have a little bit of that cheekbone still where the ear is. And you might just mark where your ears are. And then from there, you might make adjustments if you think, well, that ear looks huge or that ear looks too small. We're just having a curved line that curves at the top, curves on the bottom, and comes down slightly, comes inward slightly where you're going to have that mark. We're really not doing too many ear details. I might just be doing a little bit of this tab, I don't even know what you call that, with the top of your ear, right here where you see that, and that shadow casting underneath, and then the earlobe, I might mark a little bit of the earlobe here. Those are all things that I'll refine in my real drawing. Right now we're just trying to get our lines perfectly about where they need to be. Okay, so you'd have eyes right here, which we don't, but as far as the hairstyle, we'll do that in a second. But at this point, if you're sketching, the things to pay close attention to are the head shape itself. If you are doing a more longer face, or you may have it come down a little bit farther. If you are having a square face, things to note are you're going to have a bit more of a jawbone down here where it's going to have a soft angle that is changing. And then a heart, you're probably going to have that widow's peak and a more extended kind of exaggeration in the cheekbones here that comes down a little bit farther, more straight line into the chin. Those would be like the notable differences. And then we're going to come down here with the neck. Same thing with the neck. You know, depending on the angle of your face, your neck could look wider. If you are looking downward, your neck is going to be wider side to side. If you're looking upward, it's going to be wider as well. But if you're looking straight on, it's going to have, it's going to be sort of somewhat in here about where your neck is going to be. If you are drawing a child or something like that, their head is going to be larger than their neck. So that neck is going to be a good bit smaller, more narrow than an adult. And, you know, body shape, etc. changes. But that is sort of a no if you're doing a child and you think that looks too, you know, their neck is going to be shorter and their neck is going to be more tighter in on the face as well. Okay, so I'm doing this short sort of neckline. Then I'm going to extend this like slanted shoulder line. And depending on where you have your neckline and where you have your face, like I can see my face is slightly off center, and that is totally okay. But I'm going to note that these shoulders are kind of going off the page, and that's totally fine. If you look at how I did it on here, I sort of have this like loose bust line, so to speak. I do the same thing on this gal right here that's sort of cutting off the shoulders. And then for this girl, you know, you're seeing that one shoulder, the other side is covered up by paint. Those are all things that will kind of shift slightly with whatever it is that you're drawing, however you're drawing. But for me, I'm going to sort of have this shoulder coming off the page, and we'll just kind of go from there. And I'll do a little bit of a bust line here. Okay, now let's look at hair lines. Now, I just want to pause and say, if you are using a template for this, just take it all in, listen and watch and get these lines. A lot of these tips are going to be things that you'll want to know as well, as far as adjusting the details of your specific face that you are drawing. But I will definitely show you the template version in just a second. Okay, so we have these hairstyles right here, lots of different options. The main thing to know is this skull line, when we're going to add this skull line, and then also if you're going to do bangs or something like that, they're going to come just above that eye line. So make sure you've drawn that center line, both horizontal and vertical, to give you guys those notes. And then, yeah, if you want to do a braid or some sort of shorter hairstyle, you could do curly hair that is a little bit shorter. You can do straight hair with bangs that's a little bit longer, this wavy bob. I do often love to overlap hair on one side of the shoulder because I think it just adds a little bit of a more dramatic look to the portrait, like I did in this guy right here. But you don't have to do that. Also in this girl, I did a little bit of like hair kind of blowing in the wind. Those are all optional things to sort of enhance your portrait. All right, so I'm going to go with this sort of little bang covered top knot gal right here. So it's important that you have made these lines correctly because her top knot is literally going to start right from behind these ears. Now, obviously there's hair behind her head. You just can't see it. So this line is important that I have my ears right on because that's where you're going to see that hair pull up from the ponytail. All right, so I'm doing a loose line here, and it's going to be a little bit fatter than the head itself because your hair has a little bit of body there, and it's going to come up into this sort of top knot. Now, good thing to know as I'm sitting here drawing this, if I was going to do this again, and actually since this is my sketch page, I was just thinking like, I think this bun is going to go off the page, which is not awesome. The good news is this is my sketch, which is why it's so good to have a sketch because I'm going to adjust this when I put it into my frame. And instead of having it here, I'll be able to adjust it and make it about right here how I want it to be. So if you are doing top knot, you can see I'm using this like really loose, sketchy lines. You know, a lot of this detail is going to be added when I come in with my watercolor. So giving some loose, sketchy lines and maybe a few little lines to show where the bun is coming into the top does not have to be perfect at all. We're just giving the idea of this hair bun. I am going to do a little bit of a, make this sort of a scarf. So I'm doing like a ovally square here with a bandana here, and then a bandana that's going to overlap her bangs. I'm drawing a little bit darker now so you can see it on the screen, but also so I can copy it when I get onto my transfer. All right, so I have this hair coming up here, and then I'm going to have a hairline here where those temples are that I've already adjusted. Then I'm going to come down with the bangs. Now, if you are creating bangs on your picture, this where we already drew our hairline, if you can remember, our skull line was up here a little bit. I'm drawing this darker for you to see. Then our hairline is going to start lower. Okay, so our hairline is going to start right here, and that's going to be the top of my bangs, not up here, not down here, about the top of my bangs. So where that hairline started, all right? So it's going to be below the scalp, or below the head, the top of the skull. And then I'm going to create these bangs that are sort of like wispy and loose, and a bit of a wonky zigzag where the bangs are cut. You will notice that I am not a perfectionist of an artist. And that's what I love about this project and these portraits. They're just loose and sort of sketchy, and they're not, you know, in my style, it's not super clean and exact lines. So, you know, everyone has a different style, even as everyone has a different handwriting. They vary from person to person. Your art style is going to vary from person to person as well. So you see me doing these loose, sketchy lines. If that is making you feel stressed, feel free to just keep that clean, sort of like perfect line that you've got. But you can look on mine and see I have got these sort of loose lines here. But the main thing is that our bangs are starting at the hairline, not at the top of the scalp. Or yes, the top of the skull. Okay, we're going to do a couple little hoop earrings here. And yeah, that's about what I've got. I do sometimes like to do a little bit of a rosy cheek line for myself. I'm going to draw this darker so you can see it about where I'm going to do some rosy cheeks for her. And if you are a little bit more advanced, you may do some sort of collarbone note for yourself that we will put in during the watercolor portion of this. But for now, I'm going to check on my frame and see I've got it where I want it, and it looks like it's going to be a good fit for me. Now we're going to put it onto our watercolor paper. And this is also where, if you are using the graphite transfer, you've decided on which gal you want to use for your transfers, this is now when you might want to cut that out, or you don't have to cut it out, but we're going to put it on top of the watercolor paper, and I'm going to show you the graphite transfer, which is one of my favorite art tricks that I learned as a teenager, but it is such a game changer. And especially if you are creating a piece of artwork, a portrait. Sometimes creating a portrait is so difficult on the sketch portion, and then you work so hard to get the proportions right, and then you don't have to create it all over again on your watercolor paper. And that is where your graphite transfer is going to be your best friend. Okay, so if you are using your template, you can cut that out, or you can use, you can honestly, you don't have to cut it at all. But you're going to put this on your top of your paper and make sure it fits nicely. You could, if you were worried you were going to overlap, you could carefully cut this page so it fits just right on your page how you want it on your watercolor paper, but you don't have to do that. I'm going to show you the graphite transfer process on this, and then I'm going to actually use the graphite transfer for my girl that I created. With the graphite transfer, you are going to use the side of your pencil, okay? So I am using the exact page that I have, either my sketched drawing, if you freehanded a sketch, or you're going to use this actual page, and we are going to put graphite on the back of this page, okay? Some people stop me at this point because they're confused, but I want to reiterate, you're going to use whichever picture you're going to use, either your sketch page or your template, we'll call it, and you're going to flip it over, and you're going to cover the back of it with graphite. Okay, so you're holding your pencil on the side like this, and you're covering it with graphite everywhere, and you can be doing this with me right now if you are watching along at home. And I'm using the side of my brush, and I am covering the whole back of my template, or my hand-drawn sketch, everywhere where there is graphite or ink on the front. So you don't have to do it all the way out here or out here, but everywhere there's a line that you're going to want to trace, that is what you are covering with graphite right now. Using the side of your pencil, trying to fill that in as good as you can without missing any sections. I'm about doing this much right here. Okay, and now I'm going to flip over and do the same on mine. Okay, once you have your graphite transferred on the back of your template, either this one or the hand-drawn, then you are going to, I'm going to take a minute to cut this guy out so that it fits. If you did hand draw your template, you might want to do the same, cutting it out so that you know it's the right size. For me, I maybe shouldn't have done that because I'm going to readjust where my girl is, but at least you'll know where you want it on your watercolor paper. Okay, so I've got let's set this gal aside. All right, so right now you have your 5x7 watercolor paper, and you are placing your gal right where you want to have it. You may check it with your template and your mat to make sure it's positioned how you want it. I'm going to do that here and make sure that she's centered left to right. She's centered top to bottom, or at least you have enough of a background image. And then what you're going to do is you're going to hold this with your non-dominant hand on the page. And then with your dominant hand, you're going to retrace the important lines. So for the template, that's going to be every one of these dark lines. Okay, let me pause and say, if you are wanting to make adjustments on your template, you will want to make adjustments on your template before you transfer the design. So let's say I'm using this template and I want this gal to have a little bit of longer hair, and I want it to go over top of that shoulder. The hair that's going in front of the shoulders is what you would draw, and the hair that's behind, you would maybe just put a little bit of shadow in there for you to note. You would not have to sketch those shadows, but then when you came back to trace, you would not trace this part because you've adjusted it. You would only trace these important lines you're keeping. Same thing, if you decided you didn't want bangs, you would keep this hairline and bring it over, tuck it behind the ear, and you would not create these lines. You would only trace the lines that you're going to keep, and that is what will transfer onto your final piece of watercolor paper. Okay, so just to reiterate, make your adjustments on your template according to the hairstyles guide and the head shape guide. Make those adjustments before you transfer onto your watercolor paper, because once you transfer on your watercolor paper, it's not like the end of the world. You can make adjustments, but it's easier to do it right the first time. Okay, back to it. We are going to transfer. So you have graphite on the back of your drawing and you're holding onto your watercolor paper, and we're going to hold it with your non-dominant hand, and we're going to trace these lines. Now you can see I'm going slow. I am now using heavy pressure on my page. You need a little bit more heavy pressure to get that graphite to transfer onto the back watercolor page. But I do want to say, you can see that I'm not retracing all those loose, sketchy lines. I'm only tracing those ones I want to keep. So you can see that I'm using kind of single strokes of heavier lines while I'm tracing. I do want a little bit of a note here where I want my cheek color, but I'm not creating so many sketch heavy lines. I'm kind of doing that one line where just notes, because we're going to go over that in our micron pen as well. But you do want to know if you're having bangs where that line of the bangs start, but I would not be tracing that skull line. Okay, even in this girl you have right here, if you don't want this heavy of a line where you kind of see that the top of her head, don't trace that. All right, so I'm coming back with the outside of my hair here, and I have my bandana line. And you might be sketching this saying like, I can't even really tell where all of my lines are because I have so many sketch lines. Don't be too stressed out about that, because you are able to make adjustments on your final once you have it sketched. The main thing that you're trying to do right here is get those proportions right. Now, I think I've sketched everything I need. So I'm gonna hold my hand on my page and just lift a corner and make sure that everything I need is transferred. Now, this is gonna transfer lightly for you, and then you will get to come over in your felt tip pen. But it looks like I got pretty much everything I need. So now I'm gonna pull my sketch off, and you might not be able to see this too well, but I have a very light graphite transfer of my initial sketch. Or if you use a template, you have a very light transfer of your graphite transfer from your template as well. And now you can come back and finalize and fine tune any of those lines that got a little wonky, or if you did in fact miss a piece, you can come in and fill that in now. So let's do that together. Okay, so I feel like this line is a little bit heavy, and I don't actually like exactly where my bangs were sitting. I'm gonna bring this is where you're gonna use light pressure. Okay, you're not gonna be sketching hard for this. Light pressure to get those lines how you want them, a little bit inward, and then I might decide that I want this shoulder to come out a little bit farther, and I'm gonna make her bun a little bit bigger now that I have a little bit more room on my template. And then last thing is I'm gonna have a few lines here of the bangs coming down, and I'm gonna double check that it fits nicely inside my 5x7 frame, and it does. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to outline these pencil lines with our micron pen. Then we're going to pause that portion, and we're going to go into the affirmation. But before you trace your template, or before you trace your girl in the pen, I want you to think about, well, maybe we should go ahead and do the affirmation so that we can know what we're going to say, because I don't want you to do the felt tip pen and not have the affirmation on there. So let's go ahead and switch to the affirmation portion of crafting the affirmation, and then we'll get back to the felt tip pen. Okay, so in your kit, you have these pages of creating an affirmation. Now, on page 2, I have several different beautifully written phrases. Chosen, so loved, cherished, bright, treasured. If you look at mine, I have a few different phrases. I have she has peace in her heart and hope for her future. Okay. For this one, I have you are so loved. For both of these, it's just a small little phrase, but depending on what you need to hear at a different season of your life, or if you're doing this for a friend, what you think she might need to hear over herself. Just maybe what you want to do is look through these phrases and see which one pops out to you. I did my best to create these phrases small enough that they could tuck in and you could do a graphite transfer on any of these. So if you decided you wanted to transfer you are enough, what you would do is the same sort of process we used for doing a graphite transfer on ours. And what you could even do is you could cut this out to make sure that it's the right size. And you could put it here and you could play around with like where you want to have it. And then once you know where you're going to have it, you can flip it over, cover the back with graphite, just as we did before, and you can tuck it here. I'm going to scooch my frame. Well, I might not scooch my frame because I want to make sure I'm not going to scooch it out of the frame. And I'm going to set this here, and then I'm going to hold it down with my non-dominant hand. I'm going to trace those words carefully, especially if you are saying, April, I hate my handwriting. I have people say that all the time. And you should know my handwriting is not beautiful unless I'm working hard to make it so. So just in case you thought I have amazing handwriting all the time, I do not. So you're going to trace your graphite, then you're going to pull that off and you can see that it is transferred lovely. Okay, so that's your first option for creating a graphite transfer of your wording. The other thing I want to invite you to do, and maybe you're not doing this right now, or maybe you're going to do this later. I think even if you choose one of these sweet little phrases, affirmation phrases, this on page 3 and 4, I've created this, what I like to call a creative processing worksheet, where I created this sort of Mad Lib setup of a holy declaration from the heart of the Father for you to do about yourself or your friend. You know, even if you're choosing just a portion of this phrase to put in your picture, I just think there's a lot of power in kind of processing with God over what he believes and says about us. And all of this is scripture-based. So there's all these verses to treasure down here on the bottom. And we have this sort of Mad Lib. So, okay, so what you would do is you would say, my daughter or April, you are, okay, and then I would go to attribute 1 and I would choose one that sticks out for me. And maybe I would say, you are forgiven by me, or you are enough to me, or something like that. You choose one of these in attribute number 1, and then in attribute number 2 and 3, you would say, when I see you, I see strength and beauty, or I see tenderness and grace, or whatever. And then you have these all scripture based. I'm always for you, never against you. You don't walk alone, for I am with you. I made you for eternity, and victory is your birthright in me. So much power in that statement. So much of it is scripture inspired. And so maybe you're going to pause the video and take 15 minutes to sit down with God and do this affirmation process, this holy declaration from him. And then you can choose little words or phrases from that declaration to put on your sheep portrait. Even if you decide to just choose one of these from the affirmation phrases, I do want to encourage you to take some time a little bit later and work through that holy declaration, just to be blessed by the Lord. Okay, so at this point, pause the video if you want to work through your holy declaration affirmation phrase, or take a minute to pick which phrase or phrases you want to tuck into your picture, or by all means, if you want, you can freehand those words on the face or on the outside. You don't have to use the templates at all. If God is inspiring you, or you know exactly what you want to put on it, go ahead and do that freehand with your pencil, and make sure you position it where you want it so that you get it within that 5x7 frame of the mat. And now we are going to trace what we have, all the important lines with our felt tip pen. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so at this point I can move my mat away because I know this is the right size and how I want it to be. I do want to know, there's probably a place where you have a little bit of overlap with your letters. And in that case, you will want to not trace this back line. You're only going to trace the important lines that are most forefront. So perhaps what you want to do, because you know your words are going to be in the front, perhaps you want to trace those lines of the words first so that you don't miss them or draw over them on accident. Now remember, these pens are waterproof and what's called archival ink, so it's permanent and it's not going to bleed from water, so no worries there. All right, so I have my phrase on there how I want it. It's tucked inside my corners where I've traced, and now I'm going to come back with my pen, and now honestly the hard work is done for you. I'm going to go over these lines I've already created. You've already done the hard work. I do want to say, if you have a shaky hand or you're a little bit nervous to put your marker to the page, a few tips for you there. Number one is shake that hand out, get a little bit loose, take a deep breath, roll your shoulders back, get settled, and shake your hand out so you can be calm. And the other thing I'll say is you don't have to press super hard with this pen. Sometimes when we press down harder, we almost like bearing down. It can make us a little bit shakier. So those are just things to remember as you trace. The other thing I'll say is when you're doing a line that is a little bit longer, a good tip is to move at the elbow and not at your wrist, which will give you a bit more of an anchor on your wrist, because if you turn your hand with your wrist to trace, sometimes you can get off balance or something like that. So feel free to, I say, move at the elbow for those long lines so that you don't move at your wrist and have a wonky line. These earrings are kind of big. So you can see there's like very little ear details. I have this line up here, and you might, as you're sketching, sometimes when I'm coming back with my marker of my felt tip pen, I can notice a line of mine that is a little bit off. And so just permission to fix those lines as you're sketching. And the main thing is to keep in mind only the lines that you want in front are the ones you're going to be tracing with this pen. So even if you're sketching and you think, oh, my bangs are a little bit off, or I have too many lines there, like I kind of just made a mistake here because I was talking and working where my the line for my bangs went over top of my scarf, which is kind of a bummer, but I'm not going to adjust it because this is just for fun. And even if you make a mistake, when you make a mistake, forgive yourself and just know that you're just learning, and no big deal. If you make a big mistake, take a deep breath and you have that other piece of paper for you. Okay, so now I've got a light sketch. I have a felt tip final line sketch of the hairline, the ears, the skin, any facial features you want. Like I made those marks in pencil where I want my rosy cheeks. That's just sort of a note for me. I'm not going to put those in marker, but you can see that I made my bun a little bit bigger and I adjusted my bangs slightly. Those are all things you can do with the felt tip pen. If you're not comfortable making that adjustment with your felt tip pen, I just want to encourage you to do that first with your pencil so that you can have those lines just how you want them. And then if you're worried you're going to overlap or make a mistake like I did, you can go through your sketch first with your pencil and erase any lines that are overlapped so that you don't make a mistake and go over them twice. All right, so I have this. I'm going to put my lid back on my marker, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase these markers. You can erase over. You might want to just pause for a minute or two to make sure they dry nicely. I am erasing and kind of swooshing off my pencil eraser lines slowly. But at this point, I'm erasing all of my pencil lines, especially if you have any dark pencil lines, which hopefully you don't, because you are using the graphite transfer, or even if you free drew your drawing, the transfer doesn't usually end up too dark, which is kind of nice. You can use that graphite transfer for like lettering pieces, any sort of artwork you're doing. Anytime I'm sketching, I'm almost always using graphite transfer if I can, because then I don't have to be stressed while I'm doing my sketch. I can get it just how I want it, and then I can put that final portion in my graphite. Okay, perfect-ish. There's that little mistake, but nothing is perfect in this world. Only Jesus is perfect. Okay, so I want to make a few notes for you if you are doing a sort of traditional style painting with this watercolor. Two things. You can see there's some shadows in this color. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a mid-tone, my watercolors are kind of dirty. That's so funny. We're going to start with a bit of a mid-tone skin tone. Okay, so if you have a darker skin tone, you might want to start with something like this, or even like this tone mixed with a little bit of this brown down here, or this tone mixed with this sort of red tone. If you have a lighter skin tone, maybe stick with this and know that you can add some white or even just water to loosen it up. By this point, you have an extra piece of watercolor paper that you're not using. Even if you made a mistake, I'm just going to use the back of this one because I can't. Well, I'm just going to use it here. Even if you made a mistake and you had to use your second piece of watercolor paper, probably you have one that you can practice on, and that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so I'm going to practice on the back of this one, and we're just going to get comfortable. I want to give you like a very, very quick tutorial on your watercolors. All right, so when you have your mid-tone, let's start with blue for the sake of learning. And these watercolors have a sort of like dry, chalky texture when they're dry, so make sure you get a good lather on them. Get enough water on your brush so that you can get a good lather, and it's almost lathering like a bar of soap. But I want you to put down just a bit of this mid-tone of some sort. And then what we're going to do, there's two different ways to darken your paint. So for us, we're going to have this whatever mid-tone you land on, and then we're going to layer on top kind of a one shade darker. So if this is the tone I'm using, I'm going to probably darken it with either this tone, or maybe even a little bit of this, or a little bit of this red tone, or maybe even this brown down here on the bottom. That's what we're going to layer, but we're going to mix a version of it that's a little bit darker, and we're going to layer that on. So when you're doing your layer, you're going to let it dry, this mid-tone dry, then we're going to come back with our darker shadow tones. But when you get your mid-tone, if you want to lighten that up, let's say you have it down and it's a little bit too dark, then you rinse your brush out all the way and you get just water on your brush, and you're going to sort of push back and forth. You're almost like pushing the paint off of the paper with just water, and then the water is picking up that paint that's already there, and then I'm rinsing my brush again, and it's going to pull the blue off of there, and it's called lifting out. I'm lifting out that color. So you can lighten that way, which is like a little bit of a backwards way to lighten, but if you make a mistake, that's a good way to fix it. The other way to lighten is to get that mid-tone that you have, and then you're just going to dip it slowly in the water, and it's going to pull some of that pigment off, and you'll be left with a lighter tone of whatever color you're using. So when you are doing your skin tone, if you want a little bit of a lighter version of it, once you have your mid-tone, you can either lift out some of those with just your water brush, or you can mix a lighter version of that and you can put it on your page. And I always like to test. Anytime I'm working with watercolors, I'm going to have a little bit of a test sheet. So this extra sheet that we're working on, let that be your test sheet, so that you're mixing a color that you think you like, test it on your test sheet before you put it on your final piece, and that way you know you got a good tone. So to reiterate, when you are lightening a color, you can either lift out by pulling off some of the pigment with just a watery brush, no pigment, or you can pre-mix a middle tone and then dab it in the water, and it's going to pull off a little bit of that color, and then you can put it on your page. Those are the two ways to do that, but we're going to start by just having a middle tone on my page right here, and I'm going to mix a bit of a darker skin tone. So I'm going to use, if you have a lighter skin tone, just let this peachy color be your mid-tone, but I'm going to mix a bit of a darker skin tone. So I have this peach on my palette, and then I'm going to grab a little bit of this red, and I have a pretty full brush that has the peach and this red, and I'm going to come down here as well, and I'm going to get a little bit of this brown that I'm pulling off, and then I'm going to dab it in the water and do the same thing again, and I'm trying to mix this middle brown, and let's see what I got here. Okay, so I kind of like this. It's maybe a little bit more red than I want, but if I get water on my brush and keep it moving, I'm going to come back to this brown and get a little bit of that. That is sort of, now maybe that's my darker tone. But the other thing I can do is get a little bit more water on my brush to get back to that mid-tone that I'm looking for. The more water you have, the lighter your tone is going to be. So I'm going to put this mid-tone on my surface, and you can see I'm kind of like moving this paint around on my brush or on my page. I'm holding the brush a little bit higher than a pencil, and you can see I've sort of left these like lighter spots where I might do my sort of like cheek color. You don't have to do that, but I'm going to fill in with my midtone. So you go ahead and do that now. If you were pre-mixing a midtone, it's a little bit, you'll have to do a little finesse to kind of remix that tone. The other thing you can kind of do, if you kind of run out of your midtone, you can sometimes add a little bit of water to it, and it will almost remix. Like I still have a little bit here, and I'm just adding a little water to remix. You can see I'm going over these lines of the marker, and it's not even filling in. So if you're running out of watercolor, I just want to say again, you can either just dab your brush in your wastewater, and sometimes that enough will pull that color that's still on your brush, but it ran out of water. Sometimes that'll pull enough off to fill in so that you don't have to completely remix. If you're using just one color like this peach, by all means, just go back to your cake, get more watercolor, and go from there. Okay, so now I'm letting this semi-dry. Okay, I've got my mid-tone, either a peach, a little bit of a darker tone, a slightly yellow tone, depending on your skin color. Once I have my mid-tone, I'm letting that dry a little bit. Anytime you're watercoloring, you want to let it dry between layers for a few reasons. One, sometimes that can make your paper kind of like get these little pills on it, and it wrecks the paper, especially if you're not using a high quality watercolor paper. The other reason is when you're layering colors to get that darker tone, if you aren't waiting for the layers to dry in between, it's not going to catch and darken the tone like you want it to. So let it dry, and probably for as long as I've been talking, it's dry enough. So let's come back and see what we got. Okay, so now there's two options to do this. When you're darkening your layers, to add these shadow layers, which I just want to show you, you're going to see shadows on the corners, the edges of the cheekbones. You're going to see shadows on the neck, under the shoulders here. You might see a little bit behind the ears if your hair, like my ears are totally exposed, so we'll see a little bit of shadow under here. But a lot of times your ears are covered, so you're seeing shadow on the side, maybe on the sides of the forehead. If you don't have bangs, you would see a little bit of shadow here, left and right. If you do contouring with your makeup, you're going to be a boss at this because it's sort of the same idea. All right, so I'm going to show you layering with the exact same color that I have, and then you have options as well to introduce a slightly different tone to layer as well. But I have water in my brush, and I'm going to kind of re-wet this watercolor. That's what's kind of cool about watercolor. Just with water, I have this dry watercolor, and now what was dry now is moving again because I've added water to it. So now it's the same color, but you can see that I'm darkening with a little bit of shadow on her cheekbones without even adding additional color there. So I'm lining, I have kind of what feels really harsh right now, a little bit of shadow lines here. You go ahead and do that as well with even the same color, or if you feel comfortable and you want to mix something a little bit different. I've got a bit of shadows here where her neck is, and I'm going to shadow on the inside of her ears. This is just the same color I've already used, and I might shadow a little bit under her bangs. We'll add that peach in a minute, but you might be looking at this and saying, those are pretty harsh lines, April. You haven't mixed at all. You have 2 layers that are kind of harsh lines in the middle. So there's a couple options there. If you like that harsh line look, you can leave them. Depending on the mood I'm in, sometimes I have harsh lines in mine, sometimes I don't. But if you want to blend them, you can do that, and I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, so I have these harsh lines. At this point, I'm going to try and get all the color off my brush, and I now have just a wet brush, and I'm going to very simply, you want to make sure your brush isn't too wet right now. I can tell mine's a little bit wet, so I just dab it on the paper towel, and I'm just going to move my wet paintbrush with nothing but water on it between those 2 color tones. Okay, so I have my darker layer and I have my lighter layer, and I'm just moving this paint around, and what it's doing is it's creating this sort of blend tone between the dark color and your base mid-tone, and it's blending those layers together. Okay, I haven't added more paint. I've simply just got water on my brush, and I'm moving that paint around. You can see how that looks a little bit nicer, and the lines are not as harsh. Okay, so now you guys can keep adding shadow. Feel free to introduce another color if you want. If you feel like, hey, I want these lines a little bit darker, I want a little bit more contrast. Right now, I'm just grabbing a little bit of this brown, and I'm going to come back over here and go straight on top. Now, if I was smart, I would have double checked that it was the color that I wanted. And if it's dry enough, I can come in here with this sort of dark shadow color, and you're going to see shadow here on the left and right side of the neck, maybe even under here where your throat is. And then even if you add that 3rd layer of dark tone, the same rule applies. You can come back and get just water on your brush and blend those lines a little bit. Okay, I do want to say, keeping in mind that you want balance in your picture. So I have this harsh shadow over here on the right. Since we're creating this shadow out of nothing and we're not drawing from life, I'm kind of balancing that shadow here on the left just for looks, honestly. And you don't have to do that, but you can. I almost was going to do a dark shadow on this left-hand side, but I didn't want it to be too dark that I didn't see the words behind me. So that is good to keep in mind. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a pinky cheekbone action, a little bit of a blush tone. I'm going to double check my pink. It's a little bit pink, but with this darker skin tone, I think it will be okay. I'm filling in these white sections. Now this is sort of playful. Obviously it's a harsh pop of color, but I think I'm just going to leave it. On the example I have, I've blended it more with that same technique of clearing off my brush with just water on it and moving your wet brush between those 2 tones, and that's going to give you, it's going to spread that highlight out a little bit more so that it doesn't pop as much. But depending on your style and what you're feeling, you can definitely leave it a harsh line if you want. I'm going to do some gold hoops here, and any color you want, add those colors in. I'm going to have her hair band, this sort of scarf, so to speak. I'm going to have that next, and I probably have too much water on my brush for this. So if, as you're painting, I really didn't say this before, I have a watercolor class that has a ton of watercolor technique in it, but so feel free to go find that on our website if you like this class. But sometimes when you are painting, you have too much water on your brush, and it's going to like kind of puddle everywhere, and you're going to be frustrated because you have this color you want, but then you don't have enough control over the color. So you have too much paint on your brush. So your options are, probably all you need to do is dab that paintbrush on the paper towel, and the paper towel is going to soak up that water, and you're not going to lose your whole color, but it's going to pull off a little bit of that excess water, and then you can still use that color. So that is what I should have done here, but I was a little ahead of myself. But that's just a tip to remember. Now, same thing applies. If I want a darker tone in this, or I want to show a little bit of a dimension in this scarf color, my options are layer the same color again, or come to an analogous color or a color that's near it on the color wheel and you can use that to blend as well. So I'm doing that with some purple now, and I have a little bit of some lines here and a little bit of a knot, and that's a bit of a little playful scarf, but I did that with just a different color. Okay, so now she is gonna have a dark brown hair. So when you get to hair color, same rules apply. If you look at this one, we're gonna start with that mid-tone, which for me is this like dark gray here. And then you're gonna add a dark color on top, a darker tone on top to get that shadow. One thing I wanna know is if you have hair that is down, you are definitely going to see a darker tone of the hair here behind the neck because the shadow is casting. You can, well, this hair is actually really dark, but this hair is it's disappearing behind her neck and it's dark there. I'm gonna show you this one is, oh, where's my other gal? Oh, right here. Okay, this girl as well, she's got all kinds of stuff going on, but I have this sort of dark shadow color here behind her neck that is darker than the mid-tone. So we're gonna start with this middle color, and I'm gonna double check that it's a color that I like, and that is definitely a dark brown, maybe darker than I want it. So I'm gonna try to get it a little bit lighter. You can get it lighter by adding a little bit of water, okay, or by adding more of a lighter tone. So I'm gonna come in here and get this brown color on her hair. I'm having a mid-tone brown, and you can see that I'm slowly moving. I have a little bit of white space between my hair pieces, and that's intentional. Why? Because I want to have room to make a highlight. I'm not gonna have it all be a highlight, but you might see a highlight somewhere. You can see a little bit of a highlight here between the strokes of my hair for this gal. On this gal, I have highlights on the right-hand side that's purple and green. She's a bit of a woodland lady, but when I started with my mid-tone, it was this blue, and I left space so that I could fill in that highlight. With watercolor, you can't really erase your watercolor. So your options for that are leave the white space to start with, or you can use that lifting out technique where you're filling your brush with water and then you're pulling it off the surface of the color, and that will lift that existing color out a little bit. Probably the best case scenario is to leave that space when you begin, and then you can always come back and add more, but you can't always take away as much as you want. All right, so I have my mid-tone brown that's pretty dry. So I'm gonna come back with this mixed black and brown color. I'm gonna test it here, and that is nice and dark how I want it. So then I'm gonna come back, and here's what this example, I've got these darker brush strokes. She's got straight hair, so it's a little bit easier. I will show you in a few minutes if you have curly hair, a few tips on that creating those curls. And got a little bit of darker. If you're creating a hair bun like this, you can see that I'm having it kind of darker on the one side. I might mirror that on the right side, a little bit down here, but it's gonna be a little bit lighter sort of in the center. And if I have bangs, that highlight, I think I'm gonna end up doing a highlight right here in the middle. So I will pull this darker tone down here and leave a little bit of space. You can see that my brush strokes are kind of curving in like soft C shapes. I'm doing that because that's sort of how the hair is moving. So however your hair is moving, that is kind of how your brush strokes are going to be. So like if you chose this girl with the curly hair, you're going to use brush strokes that are swirly as well, which I'm going to show you in a second. But you're not going to use brush strokes that are straight across and straight down because that's not how the hair is moving. So in order to create that curved curly look, you're going to use the brush with the curve, how I've done here, and also how I'll show you here in a second. For now, this is what we've got, and then I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight. And for this, I might add a purple highlight just for fun because I have that in her hair bow already, but you don't have to do that. You could add a lighter tone. So like even with this brown hair, I might do this like orangey yellow over here as my highlight. Oops, I got too much paint on my brush. And I've kind of already done the purple, so you can't really see it. But if you're using brown, a highlight tone could be like a softer, like rusty orange color or even blonde. If you have blonde, your highlight is probably going to be lots of very light tone, very watered down, light yellow. You can always accent with a pop of color, which I like to do as well. And then if you're going to use a darker tone to shadow, when you get those darker tones in your hair, you're going to layer either the same color once your color is dry, or you're going to move to a slightly darker color in the same part of the color wheel. So like a darker brown or a darker red. If you have red hair, the luckiest ones. I love red hair. So just a darker tone in that same kind of color family. Okay, so now that this is mostly dry, my picture is pretty much done. I'm going to do a bit of a outline sort of background color. I love this light blue if I'm not sure what color to do, but slowly move that brush around. And you know, this brush is great because it has a point, so use that to your advantage. Oftentimes I will slowly move in and around with just the point of my brush. You can see I'm using the whole side of the brush here, not upright like this, but to the side, and that allows me to kind of push around that color how I want it. And obviously I'm moving kind of fast so that we can, you know, I don't take too long, but I would go slower if I was making this for myself truly. But you have your background color there, and then that's your finished piece pretty much. And then voila, kind of like that. And that will be sort of your finished piece, okay? I do want to pause or just kind of revisit a curly hair, a few tips for curly hair. So let me scooch this out of the way, and I'll just use my color page here. So, you know, if you look at this, even how I did it with my pen here, I've got these sort of like curly cues, like simple curly cues. For a sketch like what we're doing, you know, you don't have to have exact curls, but I will say that I'm using kind of the tip of my brush. I'm anchoring my pinky on the page so I don't lose it. Just the tip of my brush. I'm sort of doing these sort of like curved C's, going all kinds of different ways. And then I'm even like curving them around like an S, or maybe loopy like this. And when you're adding different colors, like it doesn't need to be so crazy. But if you're adding those highlighter shadow colors, even you can kind of go, like if you have a curly cue, I'm doing a C stroke, a C stroke, a C stroke, a C stroke that's a little bit, getting a little bit smaller. Or you can loop around both ways, or you can add even like a different tone, okay? So you have that mid-tone. If that's my mid-tone, then once that dries, I might do a very similar thing with a bit of a lighter tone, and make sure you have enough water on your brush and you're not losing that color tone. But maybe you're gonna do the similar thing with a different color, and that is going to give you more dimension in your curly cue. But when I'm doing this curl, I'm kind of looping around like an S over and over, and I'm using just the tip of my brush. So for this section, I am sort of holding it upright to get control. It's not that you can't go this way, but I think sometimes it flattens the brush and you lose that sort of dimension. So I'm anchoring my pinky on the page, and I'm going slowly in these S curves that kind of loop back and around. But adding those two different tones are how you're going to do it. If that feels overwhelming to you, you do have an option to do that mid-tone wash of your medium color, and then you can come back once that dries, and you can add just a few little like curly cues here and there, just to give that sort of like hint of curl as well. Even if you chose this gal right here, your lines in your felt tip pen are already curved, so feel free to follow those lines that are there for you. And just know it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a simple watercolor, and you can follow what you already have. You could even honestly fill this whole thing in with just color if you wanted with your mid-tone, and then come back with a few different highlight colors. And even that, because you've created that nice outline in the marker, it still looks really nice. And then you could let that dry, and you could come back with your highlight color or your shadow color, your darker tone, and give just a few of those here and there. And that will give you a nice little bit, just a few little details here and there. Lastly, for that under hair, here and here, it is going to be darker than this middle tone because you've got shadow here. And to kind of reiterate your steps, for the watercolor portion, you start with the mid-tone, whether you're doing the skin or whether you're doing the hair, let that dry, come back with a layer of a slightly darker tone, and let that come over top as sort of a shadow color. If you are filling in highlights, you can either lift out that paint with your lift out technique, or you can leave the white space ahead of time and then have that highlight kind of waiting there for you. I hope you enjoyed this class. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. I just want to encourage you that you are so precious to God, and these words of affirmation really have so much power. So happy painting. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sheep portraits for everyone you love, and be sure to connect with us online at Scripturedoodle.com and on social media at Scripturedoodle. We love you, and we will see you soon.